Hello, welcome to another session in our teaching series, Hidden Facts in Biology. We are still on the transport system. Now we are going to be looking at the transport in plants and animals with respect to their similarities and their differences. First of all, let's talk about the similarities between the transport in plants and animals. So, for the first similarities between the transport in plants and animals is the fact that the diffusion plays a major role in transportation in both plants and animals. When we look at the transport in plants and animals, we'll see that there are different transport processes that make use of the process of diffusion. The second similarities is that liquid medium is needed for transportation in both plants and animals. The other difference is that in both plants and animals, materials are transported in dissolved form. Another similarity is that tubular vessels are necessary in plants and animals. So when we looked at the transport in plants, we saw some tubular vessels like the xylem and phloem, which are used for transportation. While for animals, we saw that there are some tubular vessels like the arteries, the veins, the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. So now we'll go on to look at the differences between transport in plants and transport in animals. In doing this, we are going to be creating a table. In one side, we have the features of transportation in plants, and on the other side, we have the features of the transportation in animals. So now we'll compare them. So the first difference is that the transport vessels for plants consist of non-living cells, while for that of animals, the transport vessels consist of different living cells. The next difference we are going to be looking at is that we'll talk about their medium of transportation. For plants, they have the cell sap as their medium of transportation. Why for animals, blood is the medium of transportation. The next difference we are going to be talking about is the force for the transportation of the materials. In plants, the root pressure or transpiration pull generates the force for transportation of materials. While for animals, the heart generates the force of transportation of materials. Another difference is that for plants, nutrients are transported through different vessels, which include the xylem and phloem, while for animals, nutrients are transported in the same vessels. Having looked at the similarities and differences between transport in plants and animals, now we are going to be taking a look at the mechanism of transportation in different organisms. First of all, we'll look at that of the unicellular organism. In the unicellular organisms, there is continuous streaming or movement of the cytoplasm. This movement helps to circulate materials within one cell body. Remember, unicellular organisms have one cells. In amoeba, for example, the cytoplasm stream from rear to the front of the organism along the direction of its movement. In paramecium, there is a continuous circular movement of the cytoplasm, and this continuous circular movement of the cytoplasm brings about the distribution of materials such as food, oxygen, carbon dioxide, that is CO2, etc., within its body. This circular movement in paramecium is called cyclosis. Now, let's talk about the mechanism of transportation in simple multicellular organisms. Example of such simple multicellular organism includes Hydra and flatworms. Hydra is a simple multicellular organism with two body layers. The body encloses a huge gut cavity, and this gut cavity is called the enteron. Movement of the gut wall will draw water into the gut, and this is going to cause digested food and oxygen within it to circulate. This enables the cell lining the gut to absorb the materials. There are some cells in the gut that have flagella. And the whipping movement of the flagella also helps to circulate materials in the gut. In simple multicellular organisms like flatworms, for example the tapeworm, there is a thin and flat head, and this thin and flat head enables the surface area to volume ratio in this organism to be large. And in addition to this, the gut branches extensively throughout the body. So this feature of a large surface area to volume ratio and extensive branching of the gut enables sufficient food and oxygen to diffuse into all the body cells. A branched excretory system is also present to collect and get rid of waste products from the body. And just as we have it in Hydra, the movement of the body wall is going to aid the transportation of waste products out of the body. Let's take a look at the mechanism of transport in insects and mollusks. In insects and mollusca, when we say mollusca, we mean organisms like the snail. In insects and mollusca, there is an open circulatory system which enables them to transport materials within the body. When we say open circulatory system, what do we mean? In the open circulatory system, the heart pumps out blood into blood vessels, which branches and open into spaces in the body cavity called hemosphere. The organs and tissues of these organisms are bathed in blood, and exchange of materials occurs between the body cells and the blood. The blood in the spaces eventually flows into vessels leading to the heart. And in the heart, there is a presence of valve. And these valves that are present in the heart and also in the blood vessels allow blood flow to be in one direction. There is, however, a disadvantage to this open system of circulation. And this is the fact that in the open system, the distribution of blood to the various body parts is poorly controlled. Let's take a look at the mechanisms of transportation in higher animals. In higher animals, like the mammals, the blood is made to circulate around the body by the pumping action of the heart through the blood vessels, such as the arteries, the vein, and capillaries. All mammals have a type of circulation known as the double circulation. So that will bring us to the question of what is the double circulation. Like the name implies, in double circulation, the blood passes through the heart twice every time it makes one complete movement around the body. The double circulation are actually number one, the pulmonary circulation, and number two, the systemic circulation. We'll talk about them individually. But first of all, let's look at the pulmonary circulation. What is the pulmonary circulation? In pulmonary circulation, blood is carried from a chamber of the heart known as the right ventricle to the lungs through an artery known as the pulmonary artery, and taken back to the heart through a vein known as the pulmonary vein. The role of this circulation is to oxygenate the blood and remove CO2 from the blood in the lungs. It also prevents mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood and allows for only blood that are oxygen rich to enter into systemic and coronary circulation. So that is all about the pulmonary circulation in a brief context. So now let's talk about the systemic circulation. What is the systemic circulation? In systemic circulation, oxygenated blood is carried this time from the left ventricles to all parts of the body except the lungs through the arteries and back to the heart through the veins. What's the role of this systemic circulation? The role of the systemic circulation is to transport products of digestion, oxygen, water, hormones, and other substances to all parts of the body and collect excretory products like water, UA, CO2, mineral salts, etc. from the cells of the body to organs, mineral salts, etc. From the cells of the body to organs that we excrete them. The heart, like other organs, has a blood supply. This is called the coronary circulation, in which coronary arteries, which branch from the aorta near the heart, carries blood to the heart muscles. The flow is called the coronary circulation. So I'll be showing you a diagram to illustrate the process of double circulation in a higher animal. So we are going to be looking at the process of double circulation in higher organism, and we are going to be looking at that in man. With this diagram, we'll talk about the double circulation in man. I remember when we talk about double circulation, we said that the blood passes through the heart twice every time it makes one complete movement around the body. And we also mentioned the fact that the double circulation involves the process of the pulmonary circulation, as we can see in the diagram, and also the process of the systemic circulation. So we'll talk about the pulmonary circulation now so that you can get the picture in your mind. In the pulmonary circulation, we said what happened is that the blood flow from the right ventricles. So we can see that the blood is flowing from the right ventricle there of the heart to the lungs, and it does that through the pulmonary artery. See the pulmonary artery. So the blood is flowing from the right ventricle to the lungs through this artery known as the pulmonary artery. We can see the color is like blue. What that signifies there is that this blood does not have oxygen. It is deoxygenated. That's why that color code is there. So from there, the blood is taken to the lungs, and from there it is oxygenated. And we mentioned that the role of this circulation is to oxygenate the blood and remove CO2 from the blood in the lungs. And we also say that this pulmonary circulation helps to prevent the missing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood, and allows only oxygen-rich blood to enter into the systemic and coronary circulation. And we can see that the blood, after being oxygenated, is taken back to the heart through the pulmonary vein. So that is the pulmonary vein that takes the blood back to the heart. So that is all about the pulmonary circulation. So now let's look at the systemic circulation, like we have mentioned before. In systemic circulation, here the blood is already oxygenated. Now the oxygenated blood is carried from the left ventricle now to all parts of the body except the lungs. We can see the oxygenated blood going to the rest part of the body. So that is what is represented there by the blood tissues. So the role of this systemic circulation is to transport products of digestion, oxygen, water, hormones, and other substances to all parts of the body, and also collect excretory products and take it to the organs that are going to excrete them. And like we can see the other parts there where the blood in systemic circulation is red, showing that it contains oxygen. So that is all about the systemic circulation. And we have spoken about the double circulation now, and I'm sure it's very clear to your understanding. Having a look at the double circulation in man, we would be going to look at the major blood vessels that are involved in the systemic circulation. So we'll group them as arteries and veins. First of all, let's look at the major arteries in the systemic circulation. The first one we'll be talking is the right and left carotid arteries. So the right and left carotid arteries supply the head, the brain, the face. Also, the right carotid artery gives a branch to the right arm as the right subclavian artery. So now we'll be talking about the subclavian artery, both the right and the left subclavian artery. The right and left subclavian artery supply the right and left arm respectively. Let's look at the phrenic artery. The phrenic artery supply the ribs. The next artery we'll take a look at is the mesenteric arteries. The mesenteric arteries, they actually branch into the gastric, the splenic, and intestinal artery, which supply the stomach, That is, the gastric artery supplies the stomach, the splenic artery supplies the spleen, and the intestinal artery supplies the intestine. The fifth artery we'll look at is the renal arteries. The renal arteries supply the kidneys. The next artery we'll take a look at is the genital arteries. The genital arteries include the testicular and ovarian arteries, and they supply the testes in male and ovaries in female. And the last arteries we'll take a look at are the abdominal arteries. The abdominal arteries include the iliac and the femoral arteries. These arteries supply the thigh and legs respectively. That is to say, the iliac artery supplies the thigh and the femoral artery supplies the legs. Now we can take a look at the veins, the major veins in systemic circulation. They include the right and the left jugular veins. The right and left jugular veins drain blood from the head, the neck, and the face into the superior vena cava. Then we also have the right and left subclavian vein. The right and left subclavian vein drain blood from the forelimbs into the superior vena cava also by draining the jugular vein. Then the last aspect I'm going to be talking about is the fact that every other vein from the rest part of the body are drained into the inferior vena cava, and these veins include the hepatic vein, which is coming from the liver, the renal vein, which is coming from the kidney, the phrenic vein, which is coming from the ribs, and intercostal muscles, including all other veins. So I will show you a diagram to show some major blood vessels in systemic circulation, and we'll talk about just a few of them like we have said before. So the first one there is the carotid artery. So we made mention that the carotid artery supply the head, the brain, and the face. So that's the carotid artery there. So we also said that the pulmonary artery supplies the lung. As you can see there, there's the pulmonary artery supplying the lungs. So there's the renal artery there. The renal artery, and that renal artery supplies the kidney. That is the renal artery supplying the kidney. Apart from the arteries, which we have mentioned, we also mentioned the veins, the major veins, and we made mention of the superior vena cava. So that is the superior vena cava, and this superior vena cava, they receive venous drainage from some major veins such as the right and left jugular vein and the right and left subclavian vein. The right and left jugular vein drain blood from the head, the neck, and face, and they will drain it into this superior vena cava. While the right and left subclavian vein, they drain blood from the forelimbs into the superior vena cava. And also, there is the inferior vena cava, and this inferior vena cava receive drainage from every other part of the body, such as the hepatic vein, like we mentioned. So we see the hepatic portal vein. That hepatic portal vein will drain into the inferior vena cava, and it's coming from the liver. Also, the renal vein, as we can see there, drains also into the inferior vena cava, which is coming from the kidney. So this is just about the major blood vessels in systemic circulation. So now we have come to the end of the series. Now we're going to be taking some questions. Our first question says, in which of the following is cilia not associated with movement or transport of materials? A. Fallopian tube funnel. B. Ectoplasm of paramecium. C. Lining of mammalian trachea. D. Mammalian alimentary canal. E. Oral groove of paramecium. The answer to this question is D. Movement in the alimentary canal of mammals. And this is because in the alimentary canal of mammals, movement is achieved through peristalsis and not through ciliary action. All other options A, B, C, and E are associated with ciliary. Now to the next question. It says oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried to the left auricle of the heart through the A. pulmonary vein, B. Pulmonary artery, C. Hepatic portal vein, D. Renal portal vein, E. Superior vena cava. The answer to this question is A. The pulmonary vein. And this is because the pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left auricle of the heart. The next question says, which of the following statements about the lymphatic system is not correct? A. The lymph vessels are always larger in size than the arteries. B. The flow of lymph is assisted by general muscular movement. C. Lymph flows only in one direction due to the presence of valves. D. Lymph is emptied into the blood circulatory system through a vein. E. Lymph node becomes swollen during serious infections. The answer to this question is A. This is because lymph vessels are not always larger in size than the arteries. Now to our next question. The question says, which of the following statements about the circulation of blood is not correct? A. The oxygenated blood flows in the heart through the vena cava. B. Blood is pumped out of the heart through the aorta. C. Oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried to the left auricle. D. The oxygenated blood enters the lungs through the pulmonary vein. E. Ventricles contract to pump blood into the aorta. The only option that is not correct is D. And this is because oxygenated blood actually leaves the lung through the pulmonary vein. Now to our next question. It says the pulmonary circulation involves the movement of the blood to and through the A. Brain, B. Kidneys, C. Liver, D. Lungs. The correct answer to this question is D. This is because pulmonary circulation involves the movement of blood from the heart to the lungs and from the lungs to the heart. So our next question says oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried to the A. Right auricle, B. Right ventricle, C. Left ventricle, D. Left auricle, E. Vena cava. The correct answer to this question is D. And this is because oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried to the left auricle of the heart. Now to our next question. It says urea is transported in the plasma of the human blood from the A. Intestines to the kidney, B. Liver to the pancreas, C. Lungs to the liver, D. Liver to the kidney. The answer to this question is D, because urea is transported from the liver to the kidney. This brings us to the end of our examples. Now we'll be taking some exercises. These exercises were taken from our book, Hidden Facts in Biology, on page 158. And try your hands on them and check out for the answers at the answer section of the book, both in the soft copies and in hard copy. Thank you for listening.